It's important when switching to first assess the switchboard for some suitable circuits that can be switched. The relays of the CT200 users are normally open 20 amp rated relays. Circuits must be 20 amp or less in order to be switched. There is a maximum of 3 relays per unit, which means 3 circuits that can be switched per unit. Examples of circuits that can be switched are lighting, power, pool pumps, air conditioners if suitably rated, and electric hot water systems. It is important to check before switching lighting if there is any hardwired smoke detectors on the lighting circuit to be switched. If there are hardwired smoke detectors, it is important not to switch lighting, as this will also switch off the hardwired smoke detectors. It's important to note now that if switching air conditioning, it is very important to ensure that the air conditioning unit does not fall back onto a standby setting when switched off and on, again at a circuit level. You must always check the function of an air conditioning unit before switching. The owner must be home for this to take place. Once a suitable circuit has been identified and the owner agrees to have it switched, you can proceed. Bypass switches must be installed for each switch in parallel. First, we're going to start by running a suitably sized twin active cable, 1 per switch and 1 per bypass switch if external weatherproof switch is required. So firstly, I'm going to demonstrate the switching bypass with a weatherproof bypass switch. This means I have run a twin for the switching bypass and a twin active for the carbon track relay. For the purposes of this installation, I'm going to be switching the lighting circuit breaker. Once a suitable circuit has been identified and the owner agrees to have it switched, you can proceed. Bypass switches must be installed for each switch in parallel. To start, we're going to run a suitably sized twin active, 1 of these per switch and 1 per bypass switch if using an external weatherproof switch as a bypass switch. For the first demonstration, I'll be demonstrating with an external weatherproof bypass switch. So I've run 2 cables, twin active 2.5mm, or suitably rated for the circuit being switched. So as you can see, I've clearly labelled one of the twin actives on both sides with relay, which will feed into the carbon track relay provided, and one of the twin actives with switch on both ends, which will be our bypass switch connection. To connect these to the circuit, we must first remove the cable of the circuit being switched, the load, and join both of the red actives from the twin actives into the circuit breaker. I must stress that these must be powered from the circuit breaker of the circuit being switched. Now, using a screw connector, I'm going to connect the load active with the 2 whites of the twin actives which we have run, 1 for the relay and 1 for the bypass switch. This is connecting the bypass switch and the relay in parallel. I'll now demonstrate switching and bypass switch of an external weatherproof bypass switch at the CT200 side. As you can see, I've run 2 twin actives from the CT200i unit into the switchboard. 1 labelled at both ends relay, which will connect to the carbon track relay, and 1 labelled switch, which will connect to our bypass weatherproof switch. Firstly, to connect switching, connect the cable labelled relay into any one of the 3 carbon track 20 amp normally open relays. Take note which relay has been connected to. They're labelled 1, 2 or 3, as this will become important later on in the testing and commissioning process. For ease of demonstration, I've chosen relay 3 to connect into. It doesn't matter which relay you connect into, as long as you take note and set up the switching in the relevant relay online. To install a weatherproof bypass switch, take the second twin active labelled at both ends switch and run it into a weatherproof enclosure where we'll install our bypass switch. Once you've run the twin active down into the weatherproof enclosure, now this may be a weatherproof enclosure that can fit circuit breakers if that's what you're using as a bypass switch. For the training purposes, I'm using a suitably rated weatherproof bypass switch. As you can see, whichever switch you decide to use must be labelled with the bypass switch carbon track sticker and labelled which circuit has been switched. So once you've run it in, simply connect red and white to the terminals. Once you have connected up the weatherproof bypass switch, before connecting the face to the base, be sure to silicone up any entry holes to maintain the IP rating.